Let's begin here. The more than 80 suspects who were arrested in West Village at the weekend have begun appearing individually before the Krugersdorp Magistrates Court. The suspects were arrested following the gang rape of 8 women shooting a music video at a mine dump.
The 60 men and 21 minors first appeared on Monday when their case was postponed to allow for an ID parade. The state says this is yet to be done. The cases of those that have already appeared today have been postponed until next Wednesday. The state is trying to link some of the suspects to last week's gang rape, as it's believed the attackers are illegal miners operating in the area.
Let's look at that particular story that we just read for you, as well as the senior manager for executive support, Futana Tebele, testifying before the Section 194 committee in Parliament today. And he says that suspended Public Protector Adv Busisiwe Mkhwebane was a team player who was also very strict with deadlines. And of course, these developments, as well as the other ones that we saw in the Krugersdorp Magistrates Court, as well as developments around the Senzo Meyiwa murder case, are going to also be in conversation as we speak to legal expert Adv Modidima Mannya, who joins us live now. Advocate, thank you so much for your time. A witness described in fact as a breath of fresh air, and a public protector who is, and I'm quoting, a victim of her own success because she's completing more reports than her predecessor, has been seen as a team player, as her lawyers seem to suggest. How convincing were some of these glowing reports of the public protector as painted by Futana Tebele as well as Advocate Dalimpo for today?
Yes, good afternoon, Bongi, and your viewers. Look, I would have expected that people who worked with the first public protector, Advocate Selby Batwa, will have their views about him. He's a person in his own right, with his own character and his own management style. The same would be with Advocate Muswana, Advocate Madonsela. So I don't really think anything turns on their view of the public protector, and I think that is not even the matter before the Section 194 inquiry. Obviously, it gives a perspective about her. I don't think any of the public protectors have not been a success in the context of the time that they operated. I mean, Advocate Madonsela has brought us this massive project of the State Capture Commission. At the time, it was like she's doing nothing. So I don't really think, in my view, nothing turns on that.
How interesting is it that yesterday we heard from Vusi Mahlangu, today we're hearing from Futana Tebele, and they both are somewhat seen by some to be in her corner, speaking positively about her, as some have suggested. How interesting is it that these are witnesses that have been called by the evidence leaders, as some have seen, the evidence leaders as taking the approach of prosecutors, but interestingly enough, these are witnesses that seem to be testifying for her that have been called by them. How interesting is that?
Well, firstly, this is not really a prosecution, but it's an inquiry. And secondly, I think it's important, even from an ethical point of view, that the evidence leaders present all the evidence, whether favorable or unfavorable. I think the last thing that we want is Advocate Mkhwebane to be persecuted, and by persecution I mean that people will only bring the negativity about her. I don't think, even with some of the things that she has done, which has resulted in this, naturally makes her a wholly bad person. I'm sure there are positives and there are negatives. In this particular process, the issue revolves around the particular complaint, and it doesn't take away the fact that she would have done some good work. I would be surprised if anybody were to come and say everything that she did is bad. I would find that ridiculous.
Now, when you then look at, a few days ago, we saw that moment when, the Free State head of Public Protector, Spelo Samuel, who was testifying about, the Freda Dairy Farm project, for example, and the lawyers were saying, and this is Advocate Mkhwebane's lawyers, that is, they were saying that she refutes the fact that he was there when a site inspection was conducted. He was adamant that he was, and eventually we saw a picture of him next to Advocate Mkhwebane, pointing that he was in fact at that site inspection, and thus leading to her lawyer saying that he felt ambushed in that moment. How damning was that?
Well, obviously it's got serious implications, because it means that the evidence that Advocate Mkhwebane was going to give, that he was not present, will have to be changed to say he was present. But remember, Bongi, at the end of the day, it's not just one piece of evidence, but it's the cumulative evidence that will be considered by the committee when it makes its recommendations. Obviously, in giving evidence, examination and cross-examination, there are body blows. There are times where you'll be caught off guard, but there's no prejudice, because the photo has been made available. Advocate Mkhwebane can comment on it. So it's not like he's suffering extreme prejudice because he said he was not there and evidence was produced to prove that he was there.
Now, she's been described as someone who's very strict with deadlines, and also talking about the backlog, you know, that she was trying to clear. And what Tebele says is that, you know, investigators may have been under somewhat of a pressure because she wanted to ensure that the backlog is cleared, which he views as something positive. But listening to DAMP, in fact, Kevin Malam, he says that this may have put investigators under pressure, and thus, you know, tampering with the quality of the investigations themselves. What do you make of this argument? Which side are you leaning towards here?
Well, you know, Bongi, I would be surprised if anybody who's responsible for managing people does not insist on deadlines being met. I mean, deadlines are set. Yes, they may be unreasonable. There's always an opportunity to say, well, I haven't met my deadlines, and give an explanation and get an extension. At the same time, yes, it has got implications on people, because these are human beings. The tighter the deadlines, the more pressure they are under, and the higher the risk of the quality being compromised. But I think that is a management issue. I'm not sure whether much turns on that, unless people are saying specifically that this imposition of these tough deadlines was intended clearly to compromise the quality of the work. But if it is about her management style and her character, I would not make anything negative out of it.
Let's move on then to Krugersdorp, which has been another big story developing not only on the gender-based violence front, but also now all eyes on the NPA to see how it is able to prove its case here. You're looking at the fact that there's now 81 suspects and more others, you know, were arrested even yesterday, over 40, and various others as well. Now, this comes at the back of that rape incident that we saw. Now, these 81 suspects, for example, are only in custody right now for contravening the Immigration Act. No one has been linked to this horrific rape that we saw. How difficult is this going to be, to have to link some of these suspects to this particular rape?
No, it's not going to be difficult to link them or to exonerate them from the rape, in the sense that this is a process of DNA testing, and obviously samples will be taken and they will go to the laboratories. As you know, often it does take a bit of a time to get the results back. You would have seen, for instance, with the laboratory test for the Inyobeni incident in the Eastern Cape, it has taken longer than it was anticipated. But let me also indicate that I think outside of the rape charges, they face a number of some of them face a number of serious charges, including illegal mining, unlawful possession of firearms and ammunition. There has been an instance I think the other day, when police reported that there was an exchange of fire, which may border on attempted murder. There are allegations of aggravated robbery, and I think rape is also one of those charges. So they do face quite a number of serious charges. I think the issue that concerns me is about the fact that 21 of the 80-odd people are actually minors, and one is very curious to understand whether they were involved or they happen to be arrested because of immigration contraventions. And that may also present another serious social problem, that children are inducted into criminality, because at the heart of this, it seems like there's a lot of criminality which is taking place in the area.
And how then does the NPA proceed when it comes to that particular matter? Because I was going to ask you about it, because these are minors. How do they then proceed?
Well, the case of the minors will inevitably be separated from that of the adults, and the court will have to deal with them in camera, and there are procedures of processing minors who are in conflict with the law, including placing them in a place of safety. So I assume that shortly the court will direct that they be put in a place of safety if they meet the requirements.
Let's talk about a matter that happened yesterday, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this one. I mean, Advocate Malisela Tefo saying that he's coming back into the Senzo Meyiwa, case, and then yesterday we don't see him. Instead, we see the instructing attorney saying that the clients say that he must continue with this particular matter. Did it surprise you that Advocate Tefo was not in court?
Well, what surprised me is that he wrote a letter, and the letter was not written by his instructing attorney. But his attorney had said, and I saw an interview on TV where he said that he was not informed about his withdrawal, which contradicted what Advocate Tefo said that he had consulted with the clients. But you must remember that he has withdrawn from the matter. And as the attorney correctly pointed out, he has not been reappointed. So I was surprised. I was actually waiting in anticipation to see how he's going to relate to the judge after the allegations that he made.
Advocate Mannya, you are a lawyer, and please put us in the picture here. When you look at what is said by the instructing attorney, for example, he talks about how he's in the dark about a number of things. You look at how the advocate, Malisela Tefo, has conducted himself. Would you say there is, all is well between the two of them?
Well, it didn't appear for a while. If you remember, there was an incident where the instructing attorney stood up in court whilst Advocate Tefo was addressing the court and requested an adjournment. And clearly there was an indication that they were not agreeing on what Advocate Tefo was saying. But as I say, when Advocate Tefo withdrew, the attorney was not in court himself. So I would be very surprised on how they communicated. But clearly there seems to have been an issue of communication between them, and probably a lack of taking proper instructions on the part of, on both sides, because I would assume that Advocate Tefo at all times will be acting on the instructions of Mr. Tobani.
And it'll be interesting to see then how it all unfolds going forward. But let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. That is Advocate Modidima Mannya, who is a legal expert.